everybody, it's Sarah, and today I have a tag for you, and that tag is the 20 Bookish Questions tag, of which I sadly could not find the creator. However, I was tagged by Monica from Mooney Reads, so I will leave her video link down below, so definitely go and check it out, and definitely go and check out her channel in general because she is amazing. But now let's get into the tag, which is pretty much what it says it is. There's 20 bookish questions and I'm going to ask them, and because there's 20 I'm going to try to take not too long with each question, but no promises. So I have my handy notebook here for all the questions. Usually I'm too lazy to write down the questions and just use my computer and a video where all the questions are in the description box. However, I wanted to make things easy for myself this time, so I got my notebook. But the first question is, how many books is too many in a series? And we're already gonna be at a really long answer for a short question, because my answer is, it depends. There are series that are dragged out for way too long and that really did not need to be as long as they are. First example is the Curse Breaker series, which starts with A Curse So Dark and Lonely by Bridget Kemmerer. This 100% could have been a standalone. It was a very self-contained story, and it feels like this being a series is kind of forced, especially since in book 2, while the general plot was okay, the characters acted nothing like the characters that were set up in book 1, so it felt like a completely different story, and like it was completely disjointed from book 1. It was completely unnecessary. But then also sometimes you have series that need to be long, but they don't need to be as long as they are. And on this series I might change my opinion once I'm done with the series, but I actually do not think the Wheel of Time series by Robert Jordan needed to be 15 books or 14. Let's say 14 because the prequel kind of doesn't count as part of the actual series. I absolutely do think that it needed to be a really long series, and I'm about halfway through. I finished book 7 and I again do think that it needed to be at least this long, if not longer. I would say probably like 8 to 10 books. However, even in the first 7 books I noticed that there's a lot of repetitions already and stuff that happened. And I really think that a lot of stuff could have been condensed or streamlined, and it didn't need to be quite as long as the Wheel of Time is. But then on the other side of the story, I also have a few series that I think personally I cannot see how the books that are planned in those series, because it's mostly series that have not been finished yet, how the books that are planned in those series can be enough to finish the story. The first one is the Kingkiller Chronicles by Patrick Rothfuss, the first book being The Name of the Wind. We have 2 books so far in this series where mostly questions were asked but almost nothing was answered. Especially not like in the framing device of the story, because this is set kind of in a way where you have the main character telling the story. But in the time where the main character is telling the story, there's also something happening, and we have no clue what's going on yet. And we have 1 book left. And actually I think that's one of the reasons why it has taken Patrick Rothfuss so long to come out with the 3rd book, aside from also mental health issues he has, that just there's no way you can properly finish this series in just 1 book. So yeah, it's kind of a question. I would prefer if there was at least 4 books in this series. And then similarly also with The Song of Ice and Fire, there are 2 books left in this series, but so far, I mean, there have been some strands of the story that like came together already, but mostly we spend time just diverging the different stories, and it still feels really spread out, the story. And so I cannot see how in the 2 books that are left in the series, this series is going to finish without feeling rushed and without just kind of having to leave some stuff along the wayside type of deal. So complicated answer, it really depends on the series what the perfect amount of books is. And then short answer is trilogy, probably. I mean, there's a reason why most stories in themselves are kind of structured in a 3-act kind of way, because it's just kind of a nice way to tell a story when you have a beginning, you have a middle, and then you have an end. And so I think trilogies probably are the best way to go. Question number 2, how do I feel about cliffhangers? Again, it depends. In a series, let's talk about series first. In a series, I enjoy cliffhangers if the whole series has been published already, because it gives me a motivation to right away pick up the next book. However, in cases like God's Grave by J. Christoph, which is book 2 in the Nevernight Chronicles, and then Starside by Brandon Sanderson, which also is book 2 in the Skyward series, which is a 4-book series, cliffhangers are very annoying. These 2 books have some of the biggest cliffhangers I have ever read. And I read both of these books right after they came out. With God's Grave, I knew if I read this book, I would have to wait 2 years for book 3, which was really annoying, but luckily by now book 3 has come out. And with this one as well. The next book hasn't come out yet, but when I picked this up, I knew that I would have to wait 2 years for book 3. And in those cases, waiting is kind of hard. And then as for standalones, I mean, I guess in standalones they're not really cliffhangers, they're more open endings. I do like open endings. I don't like the type of open ending where you kind of notice, okay, this is the type of open ending because the author wants to leave it open if they want to write a sequel to the story. Those I don't like. And I also don't like unintentional open endings where it's just like there's so many strands to the story and some of them just kind of are forgotten. But if it's really intentional and if it's just like not everything is explained, deal with it. That type of open ending I really, really love. Question number 3, hardbacks or paperbacks? And paperbacks all the way, especially if they're the floppy ones, but also if they're like mass market paperback ones, because I mean, I'm gonna hurt a lot of people right now, but I absolutely love breaking spines. Like, I really, really love it. And the nice thing about paperbacks that I personally find also is that paperbacks, I think, get prettier the more you read them and the more they look read. However, with hardbacks, I want to keep them as pristine as possible. And there's a few series only that I just love the hardback look so much that I go out of my way to get the hardback, like Skyward being one of those series. But generally while reading, that also means that I'm kind of not as immersed in the story because I want to be careful to like keep the book as pristine as possible. Whereas with paperbacks, I don't care, I chuck it in my bag, I read it on the subway and well, I just do whatever I want with it and it gets prettier the more I use it. Question number 4, my favorite book, The Picture of Dorian Gray by Oscar Wilde. Question number 5, least favorite book, The Catcher in the Rye by I think J.D. Salinger. Is that the name of the author? Yeah, I had to read it for school and I really, really hated it. Like, I really hated it. I have never read a book as fast because I just wanted to be done with it, but I also didn't want to skip it because I had to read it for school, and I was one of those few people, at least when I had to read it, that actually read the books they had to read for school. Question number 6, love triangles, yes or no? And this one is again a kind of depends story. I have read a handful of love triangles that I really, really loved. However, in general, it's not one of my favorite tropes, although, again, overall, I think there aren't really any good or bad tropes, but it's just what you do with them, and love triangles happens to be one of those tropes that usually really isn't well executed, so I'll stay with no. Most recent book I just couldn't finish, The Forest Mage by Robin Hobb, which is book 2 in the Soldier's Son trilogy, and I just decided to like DNF the entire trilogy because I have just found that mostly if I read Robin Hobb, I just kind of enjoy it. I kind of like bear with it. It's not like I hate it, but I also don't really enjoy it and don't really love it. So I decided, after all, I have given her the chance of 3 whole trilogies that I have finished by her, and I'm just gonna leave it at that. Question number 8, a book I am currently reading, and I'm not gonna stay with one book. I'm just gonna share all the books I'm currently reading with you, because where's the fun in just telling you about one of them? And I'm reading a lot of books right now because I'm trying to finish my TBR for August. But anyway, firstly, I'm reading Calamity by Brandon Sanderson, which is book 3 in the Reckonist trilogy, and I'm about a third of the way into the book. Also still reading Everfair by Nisi Shaw. I have not continued reading this since my mid-month August wrap-up, but this is a kind of alternate history steampunk fantasy. I finally started Time of Contempt by Andrzej Sapkowski, which is book 4 in the Witches series, which also is a high fantasy series, and I am about 50 pages into it. Then I'm reading A Certain Uncertainty by Gaurav Suri and Hartosh Singh Bal. I am about halfway into the book, and this is a mathematics, literary fiction type of story. And then I'm also about halfway through The Gilda Stories by Jewel Gomez, and this is a black lesbian vampire book. Question number 9, the last book I recommended to someone, and I gotta be honest, I don't recommend books that much, like personally to someone. However, the book I'm going with is Kings of the Wild by Nicholas Ames, because Monica, also from Mooney Reads, recently asked me whether or not I would recommend it to her, and I was really complicated as I am with this video, and I didn't just say yes or no, but I was like, well, kind of, but also it's a fantasy setting, so I know you don't enjoy that, so maybe not, but also generally I would still really recommend you pick up the book, because I'm just a really hard person to ask whether or not you should read a book. It's just, in general, it's just something I do. I cannot give a straightforward answer. Question number 10 is the oldest book I have read by publishing date, and I think that's probably Johann Wolfgang von Goethe Faust Part 1, which was published in 1808, or not published because it's a play, so like it was put out into the world in 1808. However, if you don't want to count a play but want to go with a novel, then probably Emma by Jane Austen, which was published in 1815, I believe. Then next, the newest book I have read is Dokkebi Vicious Spirits by Kat Cho, which is the sequel to Gumiho Wicked Fox, and this was only published like a few days ago, a week ago, I think on the 18th of August 2020, so pretty new for a book. Question number 12 is favorite author, and for that I have 2 answers. The first is Anne Bishop, which is kind of my nostalgia favorite author, but as far as how much I enjoy his books, by now Brandon Sanderson probably should count as my favorite author, but I just cannot let go of Anne Bishop. Question number 13, buying or borrowing. I will always buy books because I am not only an avid reader and a book lover, I am also a book collector. And so if I have a book and I have read it and I have loved it, then I want to own it and then I want to buy it. So I'm just always going with buying. A book I dislike that everyone seems to love, The Poppy War by R.F. Kuang, and if you want to know why I dislike this book, I have 2 whole discussion/rant videos on this, so I will leave both of them linked down below. Question number 15, bookmark or dog ear, and I think you're going to guess the answer by the fact that I don't mind doing this to my books. I usually dog ear, sorry. I usually dog ear my books, except maybe I started using bookmarks with either special editions or hardcovers sometimes, but generally I just dog ear. Also, I just love seeing the marks from dog earing books, like later on when I reread the books and I'm like, oh hey, I stopped here when I first read this book. It's just nice. Question number 16, a book I can always reread. Basically the entire Black Jewel series by Anne Bishop, but more specifically the second book, Heir to the Shadows, which is probably my favorite book in the series. And this is just my comfort series in general. I love it so much. Question number 17, can you read while listening to music? And yes, generally I can do that. I quite often read while I'm on the subway or just like on public transport. and I never go without my earphones on public transport, so if I read on public transport, chances I'm listening to music are like 99%. However, at home I don't really listen to music, so at home I don't read while listening to music. Question number 18, one POV or multiple POVs, and if it's first person narration, always just one POV. However, if it's my preferred third person narration, I do prefer multiple POVs because I read mostly high fantasy and I just love reading from 15 people's point of views. However, not too many, because like one of the reasons why it's taking me so long to finish Everfair is because it's a 400-page book with like 20 different POVs, and so you don't really get to know any of them closer, and so I don't really care about any of the people, and so yeah, there can be too much of something good as well. Question number 19, do you read a book in one sitting or over multiple days? And again, I don't have a preferred reading method. This is just whatever the book makes me feel. Sometimes you have books that are, especially YA, that are really easy to read, where I just sit down and read almost the entire book in one sitting, or maybe 2 or 3 sittings. But then I also have classics where usually my attention span is between 20 and 50 pages. And with most classics, if I read longer than that, I just notice that I don't get as much of the story out of it as if I just read it in very slow increments. So sometimes with classics, it might take me 1 to 2 months to finish a classic. But yeah, it depends on the book again. And then question number 20, the last question, is who do you tag? And I will once again tag people on Twitter, so go over there if you're interested. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, maybe think about giving me a thumbs up and also maybe subscribing. Tell me in the comments down below what your answers would be to any of those questions. I'm especially interested in the first question, like how many books are too many in a series for you? Like, because for me it really depends, and I'm usually not scared of seeing like longer series and starting them, unless like it's like at the moment where I'm reading The Wheel of Time and I really don't want to start another series that's as long, like at the same time. But yeah, all the links to my social media are in the description box down below, so go and check those out. All the links to my book club of Queens, Witches and Valkyries, in which we read one adult high fantasy book written by a woman per month, are also linked down below, so go and check those out as well. And with that said, I hope I'll see you soon. Bye!